Another one is spreading the floor with your hands. Another one is spinning your elbow pits facing forward. But when your hands are on the floor, so you're in a closed chain position, it's really hard to sort of contextualize, right? Conceptualize? I can't think. It's really hard to understand those concepts when your hands can't physically move. Alright, just talking about shoulder position in a plank today. So anytime you're in a plank, the arms are out in front of you, that's putting your shoulder in flexion. You want external rotation of the shoulders, that's going to be the most stable position for you. The problem is when people are doing planks, so if you're in a low plank of the forearms, it's really hard to externally rotate. You're almost guaranteed to be an internal rotation. But even from a tall plank, so the cues of external rotation are if you're a weightlifter, breaking the bar. Another one is spreading the floor with your hands. Another one is spinning your elbow pits facing forward. But when your hands are on the floor, so you're in a closed chain position, it's really hard to sort of contextualize, right? Conceptualize? Fuck, I can't think. It's really hard to understand those concepts when your hands can't physically move. So when your hands are blocked in place on the ground, you want to be externally rotating through the shoulders. So you need to think about creating some amount of torque and tension through your arm up into the shoulder socket to get the shoulder into a stable position. That's going to give you a much stronger plank position. The problem is once your hands are on the ground, it's hard for people to think about those positions. But here's something for sure, if your elbows are bending at any point in a plank, you've lost your shoulder position. So if you ever find yourself in a plank and your arms are bent, your shoulders internally rotated, you're in a lousy position. Rest, reset yourself. The reason I bring this up is because we have rings in here now and people keep asking me, are we gonna do muscle ups? Are we gonna do iron crosses? What are we doing on those? Are we gonna do tricep dips? Am I at planks? I say we do planks. We're just doing planks, that's it. Just planks. Because I love planks in a ring setup. You can do it in TRX, but TRX are much more expensive. They also come from a single anchor point. They're just a little bit more uncomfortable. So I'm gonna show ring planks, and I'll show kind of the next best option in my opinion. Because ring planks, they just force you into a better position. So by putting people in an open chain environment, they're forced to stabilize through the shoulder, and it also allows them kind of the visualization of actually moving their hands. So when you get into a plank in the rings, you want your hands to be turned out. The right hand at about 1 degree or 1 o'clock on a clock. The left hand turned out to about 11 o'clock. That's going to give you about a 10-degree turnout on your hands. That's good external rotation. That's the visualization of breaking the bar if you're a weightlifter. So being able to actually move the hands gives people a better idea of what it means to kind of screw their hands into the ground and get their shoulders into external rotation. A lot of that is stuff I don't even need to explain. You just say, do a plank in the rings and people are like really wobbly, and then all of a sudden they need to create stability, so they press into the rings, giving them an active shoulder position. And then my only cue has to be just turn the palms into neutral. Once they're there, I say turn out another 10 degrees, and that's their position. So as long as their arms stay locked out and I can get them turned out, they're gonna be in a much better plank position. So like rings just teach people how to plank, honestly better than I can from the ground. Just because it gives you that open chain environment to physically turn the hands out, and they're not just having to try to figure out what that means when their hands are blocked in the ground. The other thing I like about rings is that it's really easy to move your position. By that I mean if you're doing a plank on the ground and you can no longer hold that plank with locked out arms and good externally rotated shoulders, and you can't maintain that position, like what's the next option? Go into your knees or elevating yourself a little bit, but it's like, what's the progression? Going up to like a 12-inch stair or a 24-inch box? It's like those are huge jumps. The nice thing on the rings is that you just need to step yourself forward like 6 inches, and then that gives you more of an upright torso position, or it brings your body up a little bit more, and that's going to relieve the pressure. That's going to make it a little bit easier, but it's not such a huge stepwise jump. You can actually slowly progress. So you start yourself in the most aggressive position possible, which is with the shoulders lined up directly over the wrist, torso basically facing the ground, and you can just step yourself out as you fatigue, staying in a good position. Up, my arms are bending, step out 6 inches, externally rotate. My arms are bending again, step out a foot, externally rotate, and just keep doing that for the duration of the plank that you're working on. Just some other quick cues for planks on the rings. Just like any other plank, heels are together. You want to be slamming the heels together. That's going to help you keep the whole lower body engaged. Flex the quads, that'll help keep the legs straight. Squeeze the butt, that'll get the hips into neutral. Shoulders lined up over the wrists, externally rotating, and make sure your wrist is in a good position. You don't want to be broken in the wrist when you're holding onto the ring, so you don't want to have that 90-degree angle at your wrist. You want to have basically the meaty part of your hand right over top of the ring. Top part of the ring is driving into the forearms on the outside, so everything's stacked up nicely from the shoulder to the elbow, right through the wrist. You don't have a nice line from the shoulder to the elbow and then a broken position in the wrist. So make sure everything's stacked up nicely on top of each other. And the final thing, the head stays neutral. So I said there are a handful of options for these. If you don't have rings are ideal because they come from 2 separate anchor points. So the straps, they run vertically down next to you. TRX is another option, but again, that's coming from a single anchor point. So the straps are just it's just uncomfortable, and I just don't like it as much. Another option is doing it on a Bosu. Just make sure you externally rotate. So if you have a Bosu that has those little knobs on the end, work it upside down, turn those hands out. You want to be working the hands on the back side of that Bosu, or the back half, just because your hands naturally track out at about 10 to 15 degrees, which is going to get your shoulders into a better position. Bosus, it's a closed chain system, but it still adds a little bit of instability. That little instability, that's going to force you into a more active shoulder position, so you're not being sunk into the shoulder blades. That's what you see a lot. You're like, just because your hands are on the ground, your body will just buffer whatever lousy position you get yourself into. And a lot of times as you fatigue, instead of having a strong shoulder position with the scapula in a good position, your body will just sink right between the shoulder blades, and you're just hanging on the meat, just hanging on for dear life, just relying on that skeletal system to just basically keep you in place. A little bit of instability, you have to activate the shoulders, so you're actually pressing into this movement. That's going to give you that slight rounded back in the upper back, which is actually what you want. So if you're actively pressing into these planks, you're going to be engaging the serratus anterior. You're also going to be engaging the pec minor. Both of those help keep the scapula protracted, so you don't get that winging scapula. If you ever see people on a plank and you feel like you could reach your hands underneath their scapula and sort of grab onto them, that's a winging scap. It's not ideal. So being active in that plank position, actually pressing into it, that's going to help engage those 2 muscles, that upper rounded back, much stronger plank position, and actually what you're looking for in a plank.